This is Warren Sprouse. We're on the Bible Forum. It's August 24th, 2016. We're here together tonight, Sunday night, from 8 to 10 p.m. We're here every Sunday night. Love for you to join us live. Just went through a dissertation that's online on video entitled As in the Days of Noah. What are some of the things that we can look for when we're looking at the days of Noah? It isn't getting into the nuts and bolts of their particular society, but rather what God is describing here is the sinfulness that permeated that society. And he says it's not going to change. Human beings are human beings. And each generation is going to do the same thing the first one did. Well, I wanted to share with you, as I have in the past, on a subject that is really heartbreaking on a lot of different levels. And new information has come out that I really want to make sure you have access to. You may not find it interesting right this minute, but knowing that it's online in video form, you run into somebody, you can send that link to them and help them in some way. But it seems that just recently, and you've been watching the news, no doubt, there was a big kerfluffle in Charlotte, North Carolina, because they wanted to allow boys into girls' bathrooms and girls into boys' bathrooms because it was only fair. And the legislature said no. And so North Carolina legislature said no. So they were not happy. Other businesses were looking to pull out of North Carolina or out of Charlotte or whatever it might have been. Well, they've come back around again, and now teachers in Charlotte have been advised to stop calling their students boys and girls. This is according to a training manual presentation that was put together on the issue of transgender. Instead, the progressives who control the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system want teachers to identify the youngsters as either students or scholars. Now, it may be they're neither, technically, but we can't call them boys or girls. These transgender guidelines go into effect this month, August 2016, in anticipation of the new school year, which has already begun. For example, boys who identify as girls would be permitted to participate in overnight all-girls field trips. That ought to make you feel nice and warm and fuzzy. Parents could be left out of their child's gender decision making. Johnny could be Johnny at home, he could be Mary at the school, and the parent wouldn't even know it. The literature says involvement of parents in the plan is determined in working with the student, considering the student's age and health, well-being, and safety concerns. See, it would be unsafe to let mom and dad have a say in this sort of thing. In other words, Jack may be the boy, but he might be Jill in another context. Staff, it says, must take care not to out a student to others, including the parents of older students, without the student's consent. And in contacting the parents, they are told to use the student's name, pronoun, on the birth certificate, unless the student or the parent say otherwise. The school district also wanted to embrace gender-neutral bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, but those are on hold because of the federal court rulings that are swirling about. Can you see what's happening? The school is creating a world the parents have no say over. You say, well, we won't tolerate that. Well, we've been tolerating it now for the last 80 years. It just is growing more obvious. The district utilized what they call a gender unicorn cartoon character to explain these issues. The make-believe character was also used to explain terms like questioning queer, cisgender, I don't know, CIS, have no idea what that is, non-binary, gender queer, and gender non-conforming. The workshop was entitled Transgender 101, and the idea was to help teachers learn how to define and use the important terms and the concepts related to gender identity, and to identify issues facing the transgender and the gender expansive students. This is all very complex. Boys who identify as girls will not be allowed to play on the athletic teams of their choosing because of North Carolina High School Athletic Association regulations. But the implication is that the teachers' union or system or whatever it is that's putting this together, they wouldn't have any problem with that. The new expanded anti-bullying regulation is district-wide. You see, that's how they get this in. They have to allow these kids to be what they want to be, otherwise it's bullying. And we can't have that, can we? The current regulation states that a student's gender is determined by the gender noted on his or her certificate of birth. And that means what? If you're confused, think how a parent is. The Thomas More Society reports on a school district battle that parents are having over this transgender issue. This is an illustration of the kinds of things that are going on. Magistrate Judge Jeffrey Gilbert heard arguments from attorneys representing 51 families who filed a lawsuit in May demanding an end to the district policy that allows a boy who presents himself as a girl to use the girls' changing facilities. The school district established a policy last year after the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights declared the district in violation of Title IX's prohibition against discrimination based on sex. So as you can see, it's our federal government that's pushing boys into the girls' locker rooms and vice versa. The Palatine families, including students forced to share locker rooms with male students, pushed back. And now we've got this lawsuit going on. They said the embarrassment, humiliation, anxiety, fear, apprehension, stress, degradation, loss of dignity these girls experience because of defendants' policies and actions are heightened because as adolescents they are at a time in their lives when they are the most shy, embarrassed, and aware of their bodies and the differences between their bodies and the bodies of their male classmates, the lawsuit stated. The lawsuit also states that the policy subverts objective reality, ignores the fact that everyone is male or female. Now, the transgender activists would argue that point. But there's also recently, August 2016, a statement made by the American College of Pediatricians. And they have no less than 17 statements about transgender issues. And they say things like gender dysphoria, that's what they call this, of childhood describes a psychological condition, not a physical condition, in which children experience a marked incongruence between their experienced gender and the gender associated with their biological sex. They often state that they are of the opposite sex. But the prevalence rates of those sorts of children are estimated to be about 1%. So you see, we're stopping the world, changing everything for 1%. Why? It's fair. Fairness is the enemy of justice. They also say it is false that brain differences observed in some studies between transgender adults and non-transgender adults prove that gender dysphoria is innate. If differences do exist in brain structures of transgender adults, these differences are more likely to be the result of transgender identification and behavior, not the cause of transgender identification and behavior. It's the chicken and the egg, the cart and the horse. Thirdly, they say when gender dysphoria occurs in the pre-pubertal child, it resolves itself in 80 to 95% of the patients by late adolescence after they naturally pass through puberty. So we're changing the entire world for a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old, who by the time they are 18, aren't even going to do this anymore. Fourthly, they say all complex behaviors are due to a combination of nature, biology, and nurture, environmental factors, along with free will choices. Since when do children get free will choices on anything? Number 5, there is no single family dynamic, social situation, adverse event, or combination thereof that has been found to destine any child to develop gender dysphoria. This fact, together with twin studies, suggests that there are many paths that may lead to this in certain vulnerable children. Number 6, there is a suppressed debate among physicians, therapists, academics regarding the recent trend to quickly affirm gender dysphoria youth as transgender. Many health professionals are deeply concerned about affirming this sort of thing. Sex changes are verboten. Stay away from them. Healthcare professionals opposed to affirming a child's gender dysphoria based upon medical ethics principles of the first do no harm are being silenced. This is political. Number 7, human sexuality is an objective biological binary trait. XY and XX are genetic markers of sex, male, female, respectively. They're not genetic markers of a disorder. The norm for human design is to be conceived either male or female. Human sexuality is binary by design, with the obvious purpose being the reproduction and flourishing of our species. Number 8, human beings are born with a biological sex. Gender is an awareness and a sense of your male or female-ness. And as such, it's a psychological concept. It's not an objective biological entity. Number 9, a person's belief that one is something one is not, at best, is a sign of confused thinking. At worst, it's delusional. Number 10, cross-sex hormones, estrogen for boys, testosterone for girls, are associated with dangerous health risks. Number 11, puberty is not a disorder. Should not be arrested as though it is a disease. Number 12, pre-pubertal children who receive puberty-blocking hormones, followed by cross-sex hormones, are permanently sterilized. 13, at least one prospective study demonstrates that all pre-pubertal children placed on I can't say this word that many times, puberty-blocking drugs eventually choose to begin sex reassignment with cross-sex hormones. This suggests that impersonation of the opposite sex and pubertal suppression, far from being fully reversible and harmless, as proponents claim, sets into motion a single inevitable outcome, transgender identification, that requires lifelong use of toxic cross-sex hormones, resulting in infertility and other serious health risks. This is not just putting a dress on, guys. Number 14, adolescent girls with GD who have taken testosterone daily for 1 year may obtain a double mastectomy as young as 16. This is not a reversible procedure. A 30-year follow-up study found rates of suicide are nearly 20 times greater among adults who undergo sex reassignment in Sweden, which is among the most LGBTQ-affirming countries. This demonstrates that while sex reassessment eases some of the gender dysphoria in adulthood, it does not result in levels of health on par with that of the general population. Number 16, conditioning children to believe that the absurdity that they or anyone could be born into the wrong body, and that a lifetime of chemical and surgical impersonation of the opposite sex is normal and healthful, is nothing less than child abuse. And lastly, there is a serious ethical problem with allowing reversible, life-changing procedures to be performed on minors who are too young to give valid consent themselves. This is the horror of transgenderism, and somehow changing the whole world for these children and others smart enough, old enough to know better, not naming any names, is dangerous. It's destructive. It is not helpful. Who's doing this to us? How is this happening? Well, apparently our federal government is in bed, no pun intended, with these people. But these are more indications, as I told you earlier, of the days of Noah. One of these days we'll look at Romans chapter 1. When you get to the end of that chapter, you'll begin to understand what's really going on.